At the wedding, Fiancée slapped the maid in front of everyone. Then the toddler exposed her to the billionaire. She had planned every detail of her perfect wedding. The flowers, the dress, the man. But she forgot to plan for the truth. You do not belong here. You never did. Those 7 words, spoken in a sharp whisper through perfectly painted lips, landed like a slap before the actual slap came. But we'll get to that. The Whitmore estate sat on 40 acres of manicured Connecticut countryside, and on this particular Saturday morning in late September, it looked like something lifted straight from the pages of a bridal magazine. White rose arrangements climbed every pillar. Ivory ribbons floated in the gentle autumn breeze. 212 guests in their finest clothes moved through the gardens like well-dressed butterflies, champagne flutes catching the early afternoon light. At the center of all of it stood Nathan Whitmore, 36 years old, founder of Whitmore Capital Group, a man whose name appeared on 3 different Forbes lists and whose face appeared in the dreams of half the women on the East Coast. He was tall, dark-haired, with a kind of quiet confidence that didn't need to announce itself. He stood near the entrance of the grand reception hall, adjusting his cufflinks and speaking in low tones with his best man, Derek. "You nervous?" Derek asked, handing him a glass of sparkling water. "No," Nathan said. Then he paused. "Maybe a little. That's normal. Is it normal to feel like something's off but you can't name what it is?" Derek gave him a sideways glance. "Cold feet, man. Classic case." Nathan said nothing else, but his eyes moved across the garden with the quiet precision of someone who had built a billion-dollar company by trusting his instincts. And right now, his instincts were whispering something he wasn't ready to hear. Across the garden, moving between guests with practiced grace, was Sophia Ellison, 26 years old. Stunning in an objective, almost architectural way. Auburn hair swept up in an elegant knot, wearing a champagne-colored bridesmaid dress that she somehow made look like the main event. She laughed at the right moments, touched arms at the right moments, said exactly the right things to exactly the right people. She had been doing this her whole life. Performing. And she was very, very good at it. What nobody at this wedding knew, what nobody in Nathan's life knew, was that Sophia had a plan. She had always had a plan. She spotted the woman before most people did. Near the side entrance of the estate, partially hidden by a trellis of white roses, a young woman in a gray uniform dress was trying to keep a toddler from pulling petals off the arrangements. The woman was 28, with dark eyes and a face that held a kind of tired beauty, the beauty of someone who worked hard and slept little. Her name was Clara Reyes. She had been hired through the estate staffing agency 3 weeks ago to help with setup and day of service for the wedding. The little girl pulling at the roses was her daughter, Lily. 3 years old, with her mother's dark eyes and a laugh that sounded like small bells. Clara had not planned to bring Lily today. The babysitter had cancelled at the last minute, and Clara couldn't afford to lose this job. So Lily had come along, promised a cookie if she stayed quiet, currently failing at that promise in the most adorable way possible. "Lily, baby, come here," Clara said softly, scooping her daughter up before she could destroy the centerpiece entirely. "We talked about this. Pretty flowers, Mama." "They're not our flowers, sweetheart." Lily pointed across the garden with her whole arm, the way toddlers do. No subtlety, no filter. "That lady's looking at us." Clara turned. Sophia was standing 20 feet away, and she was indeed looking at them. Not with the casual glance of a passing guest. With the focused attention of someone calculating. Clara offered a small, polite smile and turned away. That was her first mistake. Not because smiling was wrong, but because turning away meant she missed the way Sophia's expression shifted, from calculation to something colder. The ceremony began at 2 o'clock. Nathan stood at the altar in his dark navy suit, and when his fiancée, Victoria Hale, appeared at the top of the garden stairs, the crowd let out the collective breath it had been holding. Victoria was 28 herself, blonde and polished, the daughter of a Connecticut senator. She and Nathan had been together for 2 years, engaged for 6 months. By every external measurement, they were the perfect match. Victoria walked down the aisle with her father's arm in hers, and her eyes fixed on Nathan like a woman who had been rehearsing this moment her entire life. She had been. Nathan watched her come toward him and felt something. He couldn't name it then. Love, maybe. Or the memory of love. Or the idea of it. He had been so busy building things that he sometimes forgot to examine what he was building toward. The officiant began to speak. And from the side of the garden, near the catering station, Clara stood with Lily on her hip, watching the ceremony from a respectful distance as she waited for the signal to begin setting up the reception tables. Lily had gotten her cookie and was now drowsy and heavy against her mother's shoulder, one small hand curled in Clara's hair. Sophia noticed this from her position in the bridesmaid line. Her jaw tightened. She had noticed Clara twice now. That was 2 times too many. There was something about the young maid that made Sophia's carefully maintained composure flicker, and she couldn't afford flickering. Not today. Not when everything she had worked for was standing at that altar in a navy suit. The ceremony ended with applause and the kind of happy chaos that follows 2 people kissing in front of 200 people who have been sitting in chairs for 40 minutes. Guests flooded the garden. The string quartet shifted into something celebratory. Servers appeared with trays of food. Clara put Lily down, took her small hand, and moved efficiently toward the reception hall to begin her setup tasks. She was halfway there when Sophia stepped directly into her path. "You," Sophia said. Her voice was quiet, controlled, designed so that only Clara could hear. "You need to keep that child away from the guests. This is a wedding, not a daycare." Clara kept her voice steady. "I understand. She won't be a bother. I'm keeping her with me while I work. You shouldn't have brought her at all. My babysitter canceled. I spoke with the event coordinator and she approved." "I don't care what the event coordinator approved." Sophia stepped closer. "I'm telling you now. Keep her out of sight." Clara met her eyes. Held them. "I'll keep her close and quiet. She won't cause any trouble." Something moved behind Sophia's eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or something older and more dangerous than that. "See that she doesn't," Sophia said and walked away. Clara exhaled slowly. Squeezed Lily's hand. "Mean lady," Lily whispered. "Shoo, baby. She smells like Daddy's house." Clara froze. She looked down at her daughter. Lily was already moving toward the reception hall, pulling her mother by the hand, completely unaware of what she had just said. Clara stood very still for 3 full seconds. Then she followed her daughter inside. Her heart doing something complicated in her chest that she wasn't ready to name yet. The toddler had said 7 words. And somewhere in those 7 words was the beginning of the end of everything Sophia Ellison had built. In every story about cruelty, there is always a moment before it. A moment where it could have gone differently. Sophia walked right past that moment without slowing down. "Do you know who I am?" Sophia said. It was not a question. It was a weapon, and she knew exactly how to use it. The reception hall had transformed in the hour since the ceremony ended. Round tables draped in ivory linen, crystal glasses catching candlelight, arrangements of garden roses and eucalyptus running down the center of every table. 212 guests had moved inside, and the air was warm with conversation and the smell of good food and the particular electricity that comes from an open bar at a rich person's party. Clara had been doing her job quietly and well, moving between tables with practiced efficiency, straightening centerpieces, refilling water pitchers, keeping Lily close. Her daughter had fallen into a sleepy half-doze on a folded blanket behind the catering station, the kind of profound toddler sleep that happens without warning and without apology. Everything had been fine. Then Clara accidentally bumped Sophia's chair. It was not a dramatic bump. It was the brush of a water pitcher against the back of an occupied seat while Clara was reaching across to fill a glass. It barely registered. Clara said, "I'm sorry," immediately, the way a professional does. Quickly, politely, already moving on. But Sophia had been watching her all evening. Watching and waiting and building something inside herself that had nothing to do with water pitchers or bump chairs. She stood up slowly. "Excuse me," she said. Clara paused. "I apologize for the bump. I'll be more careful. You've been careless all evening." Sophia's voice had the particular carrying quality of someone who had grown up in rooms where they expected to be heard. Several nearby guests turned. "I've been watching you. You brought a child to a private event. You've been distracted. And you just knocked into me." "I barely touched your chair," Clara said. Quietly, carefully. "Are you arguing with me right now?" "I'm clarifying what happened." The table nearest them had gone quiet. 3 couples, 6 sets of eyes, all pretending not to watch while watching intently. "I want you to go get your child, and I want both of you to leave this property." Sophia crossed her arms. "You are making this event uncomfortable." Clara kept her voice level. "I'm employed here through the end of the evening. If you have a concern about my performance, I can connect you with the event coordinator." "I don't need a coordinator. I need you gone. I understand you're frustrated. Don't tell me what I am." The shift happened fast. Later, several guests would describe it the same way. One moment there was an argument, and then there was a sound, sharp, sudden, unmistakable, and then there was silence. Sophia's hand connected with Clara's cheek. Not hard enough to knock her over. Hard enough to be real. Hard enough to be heard. The room didn't gasp all at once. The silence spread in a wave, table by table, conversation dying as people turned toward the source of the sound. The string quartet, positioned near the far wall, trailed off one instrument at a time until even the cello went quiet. Clara stood very still. Her hand came up slowly to her face. Not dramatically. Just the automatic response of a person whose body is registering something before their mind has caught up. Sophia straightened. Smoothed her dress. "Now, leave. Mama." The voice came from behind the catering station. Lily stood there, barefoot, her hair loose from its small pigtails, blanket dragging behind her. She had woken up to the sound and stumbled out looking for her mother, the way toddlers do, without fear, without calculation, just toward the person she loved. She saw her mother's face. She looked at Sophia. And then, because she was 3 years old and had not yet learned the adult skill of staying quiet when quiet is safest, she pointed at Sophia and said very clearly, in the ringing silence of a room with very good acoustics, "That's the lady from Daddy's pictures." Nobody moved. Sophia's face did something complicated and fast, like a building whose internal structure has just been compromised but the exterior hasn't registered it yet. Clara stared at her daughter. From across the room, at the head table where he had been mid-conversation with his new wife, Nathan Whitmore turned. He had heard the slap. He was already standing. He had been making his way across the room when the toddler spoke, and now he stopped, 3 tables away, with a look on his face that people at those tables would describe later as the moment a very intelligent man realizes he has been given a piece of information that changes everything. "What did she say?" Derek said quietly beside him. Nathan didn't answer. He was looking at Sophia, who was looking at Lily, who was looking at her mother. And Clara. Clara was looking at Nathan with the expression of someone who has just realized that the storm they were standing in is much larger than they understood. Victoria appeared at Nathan's side, her hand on his arm, her smile still in place through sheer practiced force. "What's going on? Someone should remove that woman." "Which pictures, sweetheart?" Nathan said. He wasn't talking to Victoria. He had crossed to where Lily was standing, crouching down slowly to her level, and his voice was very gentle, very calm. The kind of calm that cost something. Lily considered him with the frank assessment of a toddler. He was safe. She had good instincts for safe. "Daddy's pictures on the wall," she said. "The ones he showed me. He said she was his friend." "Where does your daddy live?" "The big house with the gate." She held out 3 fingers. "We go on Tuesdays." Nathan stood up slowly. He turned to look at Sophia. And Sophia, who had spent her entire adult life being the most prepared person in any room, who had a response for every scenario, who had built an elaborate and careful architecture of lies over 18 months. Sophia had nothing. Because she hadn't planned for Lily. Nobody plans for the 3-year-old. "Nathan," she started. "Don't," he said. One word. Quiet and final as a door closing. He turned to Clara, who was still standing where she had been standing, one hand near her cheek, watching all of this unfold with the expression of someone who came to work today and somehow ended up in the middle of something she didn't fully understand and partly caused and wasn't sure how to feel about any of it. "Are you all right?" he asked her. It was such a simple question. In the middle of all of this, such a simple, direct human question. Clara blinked. "I'm fine," she said. "I'm sorry. My daughter. Don't apologize. She doesn't understand." She understood more than most of the adults in this room. He said it without breaking eye contact. Then he turned to the room at large, 200 guests in various states of shocked stillness, and his voice was very clear when he spoke next. "I need a few minutes. Please enjoy the food." He walked out through the side door. After a beat, Derek followed. Victoria stood at the head table alone, her champagne glass still in her hand, her smile finally and completely gone. Sophia stood in the middle of the reception hall, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, she had no idea what to do next. Lily reached up and took her mother's hand. "Can I have another cookie, Mama?" Clara looked down at her daughter, felt the wild, improbable urge to laugh, pressed her lips together. "Yeah, baby," she said softly. "You can have another cookie." Sophia had slapped the wrong woman. And a 3-year-old had just burned down 18 months of lies in 30 seconds. Now the question wasn't what had happened. The question was how deep it went.